2022 has been a roller coaster year for the EV industry. Everyone from startups to the heavyweights have jumped onto the scene. From tractors all the way up to trucks, every single category is opening up, sales are shooting through the roof. But at the same time, a lot of safety issues have cropped up this year, specifically EVs catching fire. The government stepped right in and enforced a whole host of changes under AIS 156 and AIS 038. Now, these changes are going to be implemented in two phases, with the first phase going live by 1st of December this year and the second phase going live by 31st March next year. Right? A lot of these changes predominantly have been on the battery pack. And as you may or may not know, a battery pack has three key layers. The foundation, which is the lithium-ion cell, the intelligence layer, which is the BMS, and finally, the battery packaging, which is the mechanical structure that just houses everything in. Right? Now, to talk us through these changes, what they mean for the industry, and what it could hold for the future of EV in India, we've got Arun and Rituraj who are going to talk us through it. Right? So, Arun, tell us, TLDR, what are these changes and what does it mean for us?
Broadly, two types of changes, right? Design changes and process changes. Design changes are all about how do you design a battery pack, and this is everything, like you said, the cells, the BMS, the mechanicals, the thermals. How do you all make that happen at the right standards to ensure safety and robustness?
Got it.
The second bit is on processes. How do you repeat that battery pack every single time, right? To ensure that every battery pack that goes out there in the field is safe, and it is also the same battery pack that was designed in the first place. Right?
Got it.
So a lot of things around traceability of hey, what cells are going into these battery packs, traceability around the components, traceability on data from the field.
Right.
Also to ensure that if something does go wrong, that we are able to track and trace and identify the root cause.
Identify the root cause. Right?
Exactly. So I think TLDR, I think most of the design changes are fantastic.
Yeah.
I think pretty much a lot of these design changes are things that good battery pack manufacturers already do.
Right.
So it sort of was a premium feature.
Yeah.
But now it becomes
Standard,
hygiene.
yeah.
Now it becomes hygiene.
Yeah, got it.
Which is great, right? Some of the process changes I think have been evolving. Honestly, a lot of these changes were also, hey, it needs to be done by October 1st. It's sort of, which is hard. And now at least it's been a little more breather to say, okay, December 1st and March 31st.
Got it.
It's not much time still, but some of the process changes have been improving, and I think there's been a good, healthy debate between the regulators and the industry saying, hey, some of this will affect profitability or scale or throughput or cost structures. And I think that's a healthy debate. But pretty much every design change that's been enforced, we fully align with. And I think something that we already do.
Got it.
And I think it's important that everyone in the industry is following it. From an industry point of view, this means that you're not going to have mom and pop shops anymore.
Got it.
You can't have a fly-by-night operator that's just buying cells, slapping on a random BMS, and so it's making batteries is no more an assembly problem statement.
Right. Got it.
Right? It's not like making soap. It's a deep R&D problem. You need an R&D first approach to be a competitive battery manufacturer. But forget competitive, to be a battery manufacturer.
So let's dive right into these design changes, starting with the cell.
Okay. So as we discussed, right, cells are the basic building block of the battery pack. So cells have to be right for a good battery pack to be there, right? Now, what it means is AIS actually mandates that each cell that you use inside the battery pack has to comply with IS 16893, Part 2 and Part 3.
Okay.
This will mandate that you can't use random cells. The cells need to comply with some of the test standards that are mentioned there to be used inside battery pack, right?
Okay.
Now, when you go deeper into it, like there are majorly 5 important tests which will affect how the quality of cells that are used, right? Just go one by one into that, right? And starting with overcharge. Now, what overcharging test means is, if you take a LFP cell, right, you go from 0 to 100% SOC by going from A to B voltage.
Got it.
Now, the highest voltage in LFP defined is 3.65. So you need to take the cell to 3.65 and then either double the charge, go to 200% charge, or double the voltage.
Wow.
So which is 7.3 volt for a LFP cell.
Right.
So you need to like overcharge it, and at the end of it, cell should neither catch fire nor explode, right? So this means a lot of protection on the cell itself. So that was the first.
So that's on LFP, right? Like what happens to other cell chemistries for
So the
something
standard is same for any chemistry.
Yeah.
You take an NMC cell, the highest voltage is 4.2.
Okay.
So either you go to 200% of the capacity,
Right.
keep charging it up to 200%, or go to 8.4 volt.
What this means directionally for the industry is that it's going to be harder to use NMC cells.
Okay.
Right? India in specific is already betting heavy on LFP. Most categories today use LFP. We love LFP.
Yes.
But the reasons were different. It's mostly from a cost angle or from a life cycle angle or a thermal stability angle. What NMC has as an advantage is its energy density. So when you look at weight sensitive categories like two-wheeler, NMC is definitely a more
The way to
obvious
go.
choice.
Yeah, the way to go.
I wouldn't say the way to go, but it's a good choice.
Got it.
Right? But what NMC comes with a disadvantage is also its energy density, because you are packing in a lot more energy into a smaller cell, right? So when you try to crush it or overcharge it, the probability of it catching fire or exploding is far higher than in an LFP cell, right? I'm not saying all LFP cells will meet the safety regulations, but a much larger percentage of the LFP cells will easily pass these regulations, while it's going to be much harder for NMC cells to pass these regulations. Some of the regulations, I've personally never seen an NMC cell pass them.
Okay.
Some rarely, yeah.
Got it. So that's overcharging. Right? What's the next one?
So next important is short circuit. Now in a short circuit test, so any cell has two electrodes, right? Cathode and anode. What a short circuit test does is it tries to simulate a real life condition where an actual short happens. So you put a milliohm resistor around the cell and try to simulate the real world condition. Earlier, the standards that were used to call for a very high resistance, which would actually mean, let's take a 3.2 ohm LFP cell, right? And if you take a much higher resistance, which was 80 milliohm, it will only draw 35, 40 amps of current, which is like not a real short circuit. But now the standard calls for a 5 milliohm resistor. So if you take a 3.2 volt cell and 5 milliohm resistor, it will call for 700, 800 ampere of current, right?
Okay.
Now, which is a lot of current. Now, the cell should not explode, nor should it catch fire when this incident happens. So that's a very, making sure that cell is actually very, very robust.
Got it. So like lesser resistance, more current. Let's see how the cell copes. Got it. All right. So what's
adding there again here, when you look at NMC versus LFP, NMC has higher voltage. So for the same resistance, you end up having more current. And like I said, LFP is slightly more thermally stable. So again, the probability of this happening,
got it.
passing this again is higher for LFP. But NMC cells do pass this test. A lot of NMC cells pass this test. So I think if you find the right cell, it should.
Got it. All right.
Okay.
Number 3.
Third was the cell has to undergo vibration and shock. So we used to do this on a battery pack level earlier. Now we have to go through that on a cell level also. It's not the most, most of the cells should actually pass this.
Got it.
So, but it's a very important standard because you're making sure you're passing at the block level itself before you build the battery.
Got it.
Fourth is the crush test. Now you have to apply a lot of pressure on the cell, and it should neither explode nor catch fire. Now this is a very real life situation because if an accident happens and battery is exposed, your crush happens on the battery.
Yeah.
And making sure that crush doesn't catch fire is a very, very important step. So
What's the fifth test?
the fifth is forced discharge. As we mentioned, in overcharging, we go from 0 to 100. Similarly, in forced discharge, you have to first drain it out to 0 and then keep draining it till either the current dies or there's a particular amount of time for which you have to keep doing it, right? And at the end of it, the cell should neither catch fire nor explode, right? So this is also a test that most of the cells would pass. But it's a very important test because this is actually simulating the real world condition where if things go bad and the battery has not been used for a long time, it keeps discharging. So it's a good test to add on.
You've probably heard of a battery bricking concept, which is just the battery constantly keeps draining in situations sometimes when it's not used. But the probability of cells failing this is fairly low.
Got it.
Most cells would pass this test.
Got it. So I'm guessing that largely encompasses the major changes from a cell point of view. Right. Awesome.
But having said this, I've written a blog about it, right? Shameless plug. But yes, cells are important. and the quality of cells is important.
Yep.
But just choosing the right cell doesn't mean you get away with everything else.
Right.
Cell is almost like the building block, but a lot of what's happening out there in the field today, those safety concerns are really not because of the cell. They're because of the BMS or because of mechanical packaging issues, etc. So while cell is important, really a lot of the focus has to be on the BMS and the mechanical packaging. What the government here has done is assume everyone will do a really bad job on the BMS and the mechanical packaging. And let's say you get all of that wrong, your cells still need to stay intact and not catch fire.
It's almost like a fail-safe. Like
it is a fail-safe, and you can look at this as a fail-safe. You can look at this as double redundancy.
Got it.
Which is great, but it also comes at a cost. Comes at a cost of performance, at a cost of weight, comes at a cost of real rupee cost. So is it right? I think because of the severe pressure, and I think because we need to first build trust with the consumer, I think it's the right decision to start with.
Got it.
But this will also limit some future innovations at a cell level. If you try to pack more energy density into a cell, it will be harder to do that.
Right.
If you also want to meet these safety standards.
Right.
So I think maybe a couple of years down the lane, we will relook at these standards. But either way, no matter what cell you use, you've got to get a whole bunch of other things right with respect to PMS, cell-to-cell spacing. We've talked about overcharging and what that can do to cells.
Right, got it.
But maybe you should double click on the layer 2 and 3, which is BMS and packaging. BMS to start with.
Right. So if you look at a BMS, right, a BMS has majorly 3 functionalities. First is sensing, second is algorithm, third is protection.
Got it.
Now, if you just go on Google and search for random BMSs, they will have the first and the last part, which is the sensing and the protection part, some of the protections, but most of them don't have the algorithm part or the brain part, right? So they're not the smart BMS.
Right.
Now, the first change that AIS mandates is having a microcontroller or a microprocessor based system. That means having a brain on the BMS.
Right.
And this brain's job is to first of all connect the 3 systems of a BMS, which is sensing, algorithm and protection. And other important part is to also communicate this, because it has a brain, it can sense, now it can actually communicate outside battery to a charger, to a drive system. And this becomes super important, because if there is something going wrong or going off, it will protect, but it will also tell you what is wrong, so that you can actually take the extra step of RCAing it properly, right? Second most important is regarding EMC. EMC is electromagnetic compatibility. Now, any electronic that you sell in market should not emit above a certain range of limit, radiation, and should not be influenced by the radiation around the world, right?
Got it.
Now, we were already doing EMI-EMC tests on a battery pack level, on a vehicle level. Now we have to also do it on a PCBA of a BMS also. So this is more stringent, just making it more robust and tight on a BMS level. There definitely is like, do you need to do it if you're already done on the battery pack level? But I think they've not made a clear distinction between a swap where BMSs sometimes can be outside the battery or not. So that's a dilemma, but you have to actually do it.
Got it.
Yeah. Think of EMI-MC as this, as you know, have you seen the movie Ocean's 13?
Yeah.
You know, they have the gigantic pulse. The guy's like, I know all of LA, was it LA?
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas? Okay, sorry, yeah. Las Vegas is sort of
Like,
goes blank.
Yeah.
Sort of like that, right? You have micro versions of that happening all the time.
Got it.
Every device, how much ever we regulate, does emit stuff. And there are going to be faulty devices. You could park your vehicle under a transformer, right? So for all these reasons, you want to ensure that the BMS has no blips. The BMS doesn't get reset. The BMS doesn't get switched off accidentally, or doesn't get permanently damaged. Right? So for all these reasons, you need to ensure the BMS, yes, it's not emitting and creating noise for others,
but it also doesn't get influenced.
Exactly. So susceptibility is the most important thing to manage with BMS. And I think while yes, we can solve for susceptibility by building a battery and ensuring the battery is not susceptible, the question is, okay, you have wires inside the battery, right? They can emit radiation.
Got it.
Right? So is the battery wires inside the battery itself creating issues for the BMS?
Got it.
It's a low probability, But yes, doing this 100% eliminates doubt
Yeah.
that the BMS will continue to
Yeah, so
function.
all the edge cases are taken care of.
Yeah.
Got it.
So I think it's great.
So those are the first two changes that are happening largely on the BMS. So what else is changing?
So there are two more important points.
Okay.
Third point is now AIS mandates having 4 thermal sensors on the battery.
Okay.
And because the battery is smart now, it can actually communicate. So it mandates having 4 thermal sensors inside battery to make sure that you know what is happening inside battery and you can sense through thermistors or any other thermal devices. That is the third one, important part. We actually use 16.
16, yes.
We actually use 16. So yes, that's definitely.
Again, this is one of those things that I think most good battery packs use.
Yeah.
But it's just now become hygiene and it's very important.
Got it.
It's good. Yeah.
And fourth, we're already doing a bunch of testing on the battery pack level regarding the BMS, which was over voltage protection or under voltage, overcharging, other protections. Now there's the addition of over current protection also,
Got it.
which is a basic hygiene again, but it's mandated now to do it. We already do it. A lot of good batteries do it, but everyone has to do it. So over current protection is a new addition to this. So these are in summary, important changes that have happened on BMS.
Got it. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so we've covered cells, the fundamental layer, we've covered BMS, and finally the third layer, which is battery packaging, mechanical packaging. What's changing there?
So there are a bunch of changes on that, but if you summarize it, there are 5 important changes on the battery pack level. Just to begin with, the first one is IP67 test, where a battery pack has to be taken to 100% SOC and then dipped inside water for 30-minute duration.
Submerged underwater.
Submerged underwater, 1 meter water.
Not dip.
Can't just dip it.
And at the end of it, there should be no fire, no explosion. So this is a very big design change in general. You can't generally pass this without having a good design, good battery pack design, because thermals and IP go hand in hand, right? You can.
Yeah. Actually, a lot of good battery packs already meet IP67.
Yeah.
Pretty much every battery pack we've ever designed is IP67. But the reason it's really hard is because you can't allow water and dust in. At the same time, you need to take heat out.
Oh,
If you try to understand the problem, it's actually a really hard problem.
Right.
Right? It requires very intricate changes in design, especially on how are you going to extract heat from the cells and into the atmosphere through the right sort of thermal paths, while ensuring all of this is sealed. Right? So if you don't do this well, yes, you will get an IP67 pack, but you'll end up having a battery pack that bakes itself. Think of yourself as closing a room,
Right.
and switching on like a small bulb, right? In an hour, you're going to be sweating if you have no airflow, right? So it's fundamentally similar problem statement, right?
Okay.
So this is a deep challenge, and this is one of those reasons where you can't just be assembling battery packs anymore. You need to have an R&D first approach.
Got it. What's the second one?
Second important is cell-to-cell spacing.
Right.
So earlier, for getting better energy density out of the battery, the cells used to be spaced without putting any spacing between them, crunched together. Now they need to have enough spacing in between,
Got it.
so that if a mishap happens, there is enough spacing to take care of it. So and they also, cells need space to breathe. Cells, when they come out and come in when you actually charge or discharge the cell, right? So the
Shameless plug on the blog
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
We've been big proponents of cell-to-cell spacing. It's something that we take very seriously.
So it physically expands and
Cells actually breathe,
Yeah.
and when you charge it, when you discharge it, they breathe by a certain extent. If you end up overcharging it, they bulge out, and it's something we've sort of
We've documented.
we actually test for this,
Yeah.
and we then intricately manage cell-to-cell spacing.
Got it.
The only issue I have with this specific regulation is directionally great. It's important to get the whole industry to start thinking cell-to-cell spacing. However, it's not objective fully, and it's hard to be objective because every cell needs a different cell-to-cell spacing.
Yeah.
So now it sort of becomes a conversation between people designing the battery packs and the regulators.
Yeah.
But I think we'll find a way around.
Yeah, so there's always going to be a healthy dialogue between the regulators and the creators.
How much spacing is enough?
Yeah.
So when there's an objective test, every other stress is dug underwater,
Yeah.
don't catch fire. So it's fairly objective. There's
Yeah.
no two ways to misunderstand that.
Got it.
Cell-to-cell spacing is something that can get a little subjective.
Yeah.
But having said that, cell-to-cell spacing is super important.
Yeah.
Everyone else, I've seen a lot of battery packs with just a bunch of cells just
Tightly
slapped
packed
together
together.
and just wrapped, right?
Yeah.
It's the worst way to build battery packs.
Got it.
And so hopefully that will change.
So what's the third one?
So
Third change.
So third mandate is to put a pressure release vent. Again, this is good manufacturers already do it, but it's a mandatory thing now. What happens in this is if there's a mishap, right, and there's a lot of pressure built in inside the battery pack, you need a vent to release it, right?
Yeah.
Else it becomes like a you have enclosed a lot of pressure inside something.
Yeah.
Just bad thing to have, right?
Yeah.
So you have mandated that there should be a vent.
Got
that if a higher pressure builds in, it can actually
Vent.
come out, right?
Yeah.
Vent
Got
out.
it.
So
Awesome.
that's a
Third
important change. Fourth important is putting up. There's a mandatory requirement now for safety fuse and circuit breaker inside your battery pack. Again, good batteries have it. What it means is if there is an overcurrent happening outside the battery pack, either because of pure short circuit or mild short circuit where things are just burning but they've not actually had a short circuit, currents would go up. Now, circuit breaker is a thing that can be recovered, and fuse is something that if it blows, it blows. It's a one-time thing. So
think of it like what happens at homes. It's sort of a two-step protection system. Let's say the right amount of current is 100 amps, but with a mild short circuit, you could end up having 600 amps. So it's an overcurrent sort of situation. It also ties back to the BMS sensing capability. But when you have sensing, you also need actionability, and so the battery pack now needs the ability to shut off, sort of like your circuit breakers at home. Right? But then there's an extreme short circuit scenario where you could just have uncontrolled current. At which point of time these circuit breakers cannot react in time. Right? At which point of time you need
a
fuses.
fast growing fuse.
Got it. This is to isolate
The battery. Yes. This is to isolate the battery from outside environment.
And this could happen while charging. Well, the charger could have short circuit sometimes. It could happen while discharging the motor or any other peripheral system could have a short circuit. So generally, the systems are designed with multi-layer fuses, but we now need a master fuse at the battery pack level.
Okay, so fifth and final point is addition of thermal propagation test. Now this is a very new test that is added and a very big one. In this test, you actually have to forcefully take a cell inside a battery to 300 degrees Celsius, and then the battery pack should not catch fire externally or should not explode.
Got it.
So you either contain it at a cell level or inside a battery pack level. This is a very new thing for us also, and we are in the process of making sure that we pass this. So yeah.
This is actually fairly new I've never seen any battery pack that designs for this. The intent here is that say a cell catches fire or goes into thermal runaway situation, you don't want it to propagate.
Right. Spread it to the rest of the
cells.
Got it.
Exactly.
And the cell-to-cell spacing actually ties with this one.
Got it.
Exactly. So it's sort of something that you want to work with to tune for thermal propagation.
Got it.
Again, the intent here is if a single cell catches fire, it's not really a safety issue. What ends up happening though is it quickly spreads to a lot of other cells, and all the cells are then popping.
Right.
And,
Runway.
And it's just a lot. It's 100 cells actually has 100x more energy.
Yeah.
And 100x more smoke and 100x more heat. Right? And that then becomes an uncontrollable situation.
Got it.
Right? Putting that fire out and managing that amount of energy. And again, if the pressure vent valve also comes to this point, which if you don't have the pressure vent, then you have that much more pressure built up into the battery pack.
Got it.
And sometimes when you see explosions happening, or it's basically because you have so much pressure built up and you have cells sort of popping out.
Got it.
Now, this is a mega redundancy of sorts. So if the way I look at it is, all right, the first and the most important thing is to ensure you have the right BMSs, the right software, the right protection systems at a charger level, at a BMS level. We spoke about all of that. That 99% will ensure that your cells don't even get stressed.
Right.
And on top of that, we've talked about the cells by themselves, when they do get stressed, like 2x voltage, for example, do not catch fire. And that's a pretty severe redundancy, and that's important, that's good. Now we're saying there's a third layer to this, which is, let's say in the 0.001 chance, one of the cells does catch fire after all of this. It still shouldn't spread to other cells, or should not become uncontainable at a
Got
battery
it.
pack level.
Got it.
The only reason why that can possibly happen is if there's an internal short circuit to the cell. And it's a possibility,
Yeah.
but it's a low possibility. And
Right.
again, this now becomes a question of how much redundancy versus performance versus cost.
Right.
But I think this is a good way forward because there have been rare instances, but some instances of
Yeah.
cells going into the internal short circuit.
You can never be too safe.
You can never be too safe, and especially when we're trying to build trust with the customer.
Fair enough. So I think this largely encompasses all the design changes at every single layer, every single level of a battery pack. What are the process changes that are, happening?
Okay. Yeah, this is the interesting piece, and this is where things get a little. So design is a one-step investment, right?
Yeah, one time.
One-time
Yeah,
investment.
yeah.
It could be hard to design it. It could be hard to test it. But you're done with it once, and well, you're done with it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, you have your balancing act between, like you said, performance, cost, and
Safety, yeah.
But once you're done with it, you're done with it. The thing with process is it's a continuous cost. So anything on process regulation sort of enforces a permanent cost of manufacturing, a permanent cost of establishing facility,
Right.
and hence a permanent cost to the battery pack itself.
Got it.
Which sometimes could be more severe than the design changes. Right? The intent behind process, like we said, was to ensure that every battery pack manufactured was the first battery pack that was designed and certified.
Got it.
And I completely understand why the government has enforced these things. There have been a lot of companies that have flaunted the rules. There have been companies that have defrauded on the FAME subsidies. There have been companies that send a battery pack for homologation and then sell
Something
a
else
completely
entirely.
different battery
Yeah.
pack. So in the IC engine world, there's something called conformance of productivity, which is, hey, this is what you certified. Are you producing this, right? And the same thing also exists in EVs. And I think there'll be a far more stringent enforcement of conformance of production. But beyond that, there are a bunch of process changes that are needed at a battery pack manufacturing level, mostly around traceability of every component. Starting from the cell, right? Every cell needs to have a marking on when it was made, etc. This data needs to be stored in a central database. We need to know how every cell has gone into every battery pack and sold where, to whom, and what they're doing. Again, this is a very good step. Fairly hygiene for any good battery manufacturer is already done. This will be enforced everywhere else. I'm sure there are a bunch of SaaS startups that will pop up because of this. But jokes aside, this is good. The bit that gets a little tricky on process changes is around cell cycling. There's now a new regulation that requires you to do a C/3 charging and a C/3 discharging of every cell.
Okay.
What that means, C/3 means 1/3 hour. So it's basically you need 3 hours to charge it and 3 hours to discharge it.
So 1C is basically 1 hour to charge and discharge. C/3 would be 3 hours to charge and 3 hours to discharge.
Roughly. So it's a 6-hour cycle for a cell.
Wow.
Right? Now let's say you're setting up a gigantic battery line.
Yeah.
Right? Or even a small battery line. Let's say you're making 100 battery packs a day.
Right.
Right? Some of these battery packs can use up to 200 cells. Right? So now you need 200 into 100,
Right.
which is 20,000 battery cells. Right?
Right.
And each 20,000, each of these cells will take 6 hours. Right?
Ouch.
So now you only have so many hours in the day,
Yeah.
right? Which means the only way to solve for this is to have a crazy number of cyclers.
Right.
So you almost need a farm of cyclers,
Yeah.
right? So more than the battery assembly and process,
Yeah.
a huge cost could just be in the incoming cell cycling inspection.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
Now, should we inspect every cell? Yes, we must inspect every cell. It's something that everyone does today. There is inspecting for a cell to say it's a good cell or a bad cell, and then there are companies that also get into that. Yeah, it's a good cell, but what type of cell is it? Is it belonging to this category, A category, B category, C category? It's called binning.
Right.
And then you sort of take those cells and build battery packs so that they club and they
Yeah.
sort of gel well together.
Got it.
They're like friends. But there are smarter ways to do this. There are impedance-based measurements. In fact, you can also do 1 hour charging, you could do a 10-minute charging, 15-minute charging in our case, right? But a C/3 regulation basically sort of cripples throughput because no matter what smartness you can bring, you fundamentally need that many cyclers and that much time and that much space.
It's almost brute forcing the entire process.
It is, and I sort of understand the intent, but I think this is something that there will be more conversation about.
Yeah.
Because that many cyclers and that much space will fundamentally add a lot of overheads in manufacturing.
Yeah.
Which will reflect in either hesitancy to manufacture batteries.
Yeah.
Or also will just reflect in the cost of a per kilowatt hour throughput.
Got it.
Of battery. A bunch of the process change, like Rituraj said on the BMS, the ability to store data, it's both a design change and a process change.
Yeah.
You now need systems to either store the data on the BMS, which is a design change, or on the cloud, which is a process change.
Which is fairly straightforward, I guess. As compared to the...
You'll be surprised how much it is not. But like I said, a lot of good batteries do it today.
Yeah.
But we now have to enforce that across all batteries.
Got it.
Again, I think we'll see a lot more IoT companies and SaaS companies jump at this opportunity. That's great. I think there's good opportunity there. Beyond this, bunch of other process changes are fairly standard.
Got it.
And something that most companies do. So I don't want to elaborate too much on that.
Fair.
But these are probably the big process changes.
Alright guys, final takeaways. What do you think?
Okay, so amazing, super excited about most of the standards. Most of the things were basic hygiene for us, we were already doing.
Got it.
Thermal propagation is a new thing, which we're already working and we'll soon have a solution for. But yes, I think move in the right direction.
Awesome.
I think these regulations are fantastic. Fully subscribe to everything on the design side. 90% of everything on the process side. But I think what's been impressive for me is how quick the government is enforced, how quick the agencies have responded, and the industry has come together to have healthy conversation.
Yeah.
We're a large country.
Yeah.
So the agility with which things have happened over the last couple of months has been fairly impressive.
And fairly iterative as well, right?
Fairly iterative,
Yeah.
which is great because that shows clear intent from the government, clear interest from them. It's seen competitors come together to say, hey, what can we do right for the industry? What can we do right for the customer?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, nothing else matters, right? We need to keep trust or maybe even earn back trust from the consumer that we've lost as an industry, right? And it's not important that, hey, that OEM did it and not me. At the end of the day, everyone's looking at EV as one new piece of emerging category, right? So we're all one in some case while we might be competing. The only way to earn back trust is to go extra hard on regulations.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, some of this might add an extra layer of redundancy. The only way is to start off really tight on the regulations, and then as you get more data, to keep tweaking and saying, hey, maybe this is not relevant anymore.
Yeah.
We can keep changing it.
Maybe this is a smarter way of doing.
Exactly, right? And you can't get all of that. You can't optimize for that on day one because then you might end up having leaks.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, this is the right way to do it. A lot of people talk about cost and saying the impact on cost. Yes, it's going to impact cost of the batteries, but I think it's also important to realize that the government has set subsidies that pretty much help eliminate a large part of the battery cost. So I don't think we should be complaining. The government's done a great job with respect to demand-linked incentives. They've gone and set ahead production-linked incentives.
Yeah.
So their expectation that, hey guys, build a battery pack that's safe is fair.
Yeah.
Right. And sure, maybe a lot of companies are getting punished for the drawbacks that a few companies have done. But you can't do much. There's no point sitting and complaining.
Yeah.
To me, a lot of these regulations are stuff that we do anyway. And to me, forget the government enforcing anything. I think everyone should do it.
Yeah.
Right. So from a selfish point of view, from an exponent point of view, this is great because for a lot of these things we were doing were considered a premium feature.
Yeah.
Right? That's now, in some sense, become hygiene. Right? So it's great. It's great for the industry. It's obviously good for us from an exponent point of view. And like I said, we fully subscribe to these regulations, even when they were not regulations. At the end of the day, the severity of these things is unimaginable. We've had people lose lives, right? And that's a definite line in the sand, right? That we cannot be crossing. If we can't even get people hurt And
Yeah.
then we've had so many people lose lives over this. And the reasons are silly, right? So the reasons are silly and the severity is so
Yeah.
severe.
Disproportionate.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to get in on that and fix those gaps, right?
Yeah.
And that's and I believe this is the right way to do that.
Awesome.
So fully subscribe to the whole regulations. It's going to take us from an experiment point of view. It's definitely going to take a couple of months to meet the thermal regulation propagation point of view. But everything else, I think, is something that we want to be doing anyway.
Got it.
And I think this is going to bring the whole industry forward. I just want to leave on one note. I actually had I had a conversation with one person who told me, I don't feel safe charging my vehicle at home anymore. Right? And that's why I want to use an exponent e-pump. Right? And well, again, from a selfish point of view, that's great, but that's not the reason why I want someone to use an e-pump. Right? You should use an e-pump because of the merits of speed or cost, etc.
Right.
And we want to compete on that. From the large industry point of view, people need to feel safe to be able to drive home a vehicle, park at home and charge at home.
Yeah, and not feel like their life is going to be in danger.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, that is just catastrophic.
Right.
Imagine any appliance that could kill you. Would you buy it,
Yeah, no.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, imagine your refrigerator just caught fire. Maybe 1 in 1,000 refrigerators caught fire. You would possibly not keep that at home,
Yeah.
right? And that's fundamentally what we need to change for EVs,
Got it.
right? No refrigerator and no EV needs to catch fire. Yes, everyone talks about ICE engine vehicles catch fire, so it is being unfair on EVs. But you know what? It's a new category. It's harder to build trust in new categories. That's the reality of it.
Fair.
So if you're in the EV space, try to build a new category, chin up,
Let's move
get with the program, move forward. Let's build great EVs.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so that brings us to the end of the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us and breaking down what regulations mean for us and the industry by and large. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Yeah. All right. See you later.